Hey guys, welcome to this week's Money News in Human Words. And look, there's a bunch of stuff going on this week. The first piece I wanted to share for this week was a story about a client recently looking to upgrade their home and invest for passive income at the same time. Now, these guys ended up, they came to us with one big goal around upgrading their home, but they realized through going through the financial decision making process and figuring out what the ideal investment plan for them was, that they were actually leaving over $50,000 annually on the table in terms of lost investing potential. Now, that included a tax, paying an extra $11,000 in tax more than he needed to. So this guy came to us, individual. He was early 40s, income 130K, saving $1,500 a month with an asset position of $600,000. That was broken down as a home of 950K with a mortgage of 600,000, 70 grand in his offset, and super of $180,000. Now, he really wanted to upgrade his home, but it just didn't seem like it was realistic. Didn't know how to invest his cash savings, which he was keeping aside to drive this property upgrade, and didn't really have any clear pathway towards building his investments to the level that he felt that he needed to live the lifestyle that he wanted for the future. So what all he was doing was really directing his cash savings to an offset. But after going through and really understanding what was possible, what he decided to do was to purchase an investment property, which he did at $700,000 using the equity in his existing home for a deposit. He realized that he needed to increase his savings rate, and the planning process gave him the clarity to do that, which he uplifted by $1,500 a month, so bringing total savings to $3,000 a month. Held back $30,000 of the cash that he had in place and invested the remaining $40,000, which he did, half of which through catch-up super contributions, so getting tax-deductible super contributions and investing the money through his superannuation, and then doing the rest through an investment account outside of superannuation. At the same time, created a clear pathway to his retirement freedom by age 55, recognizing that his run had been left a little bit late. And a big part of that, while he did really want to upgrade his home, he realized that doing that in the short term was going to put a serious handbrake on his ability to actually invest and build wealth. So basically created an option for himself to check in on this in 6 years' time, where he would look at the plan, hope that the property investments that he already had in place had grown sufficiently that would facilitate him buying or upgrading his home, but knowing that if he wanted to pull the pin on work a bit earlier, he might actually compromise on that goal in the future. Or if he was feeling good about his work and happy to extend that trajectory a little bit, that he could actually do the upgrade that he wanted to. ROI on this one, basically broken down as savings increase $18,000 a year, investment property asset growth uplift, so based on the long-term growth rate of property, $33,000 a year after funding the cash flow and mortgage costs of that property, investing $40,000 of his cash savings, which is invested at 9.8% compared to the 4% sitting in his mortgage offset, uplift of $2,300, 20K super contribution, tax saving $4,800, $10,000 annual salary sacrifice, $2,500 tax saving, total upside of all those combined $61,000. Then looking at the after-tax advice fees was $8,000, net upside $53,120 in year one, and extending that out to almost $1 million after year 20. So he realized that he was leaving that bunch of money on the table. But as you see from this, some small changes can make a massive difference to what your trajectory looks like, as well as the clarity that you've got on your decisions. And I think a lot of people want to, upgrade home or make their moves around property, and you already know how that feels to you. But sometimes it's looking at the numbers and being a bit more objective to see, well, what it actually is the most important, and then therefore what is the very best decision for you. Looking at the news, though, over the last week, the first piece was around, I was really interested in that there's a bunch of ABS data that came out around wealth levels in Australia, and there's some interesting stats that came from that. A bunch of things that jumped out at me. First, median income in Australia is $65,000, which is broken down as $78,800 for full-time workers, $32,000 for part-time. That's the median income. So basically half of full-time workers earn more than $78,000, half earn less than $78,000. again, 32,000 for the part-time. From an income perspective, anyone that earns more than $253,000 a year falls into the top 1% of income earners, and anyone earning more than $131,000 a year would be in the top 10%, meaning that you earn more than 90% of the population. 5% of income earners are above the $180,000 mark, which is where the top marginal tax rate kicks in, at least until 30 June, when fingers crossed we get those stage 3 tax cuts that will help bring that one down a little bit. Now, looking at equality and income equality, we're still seeing male domination of the higher paying jobs. There has been some progress on this, but we're still seeing 10% of the 10% of taxpayers that earn more than $131,000, 70% are males, and women are making up 60% of the lowest 20% of income earners. So clearly, we've still got a fair bit of work to be done in that space. Looking at the breakdown, though, in terms of top incomes by industry based on hourly rate, and I thought this was super interesting that people working in the mining industry, they're the highest paid from an hourly rate perspective, coming in with median hourly rate of $54.90 per hour. So basically meaning that 50% of people are earning more than $54 an hour, 50% earning less. Financial services came in next at just over $50 an hour. Then professional services, utilities, public admin, education, and they're all earning between $45 and $50 an hour. And then at the bottom 5 occupations by hourly rate, we've got accommodation and food workers. Their median hourly rate, $25 an hour. Retail trade, $28 an hour. Agriculture, $30 an hour. Admin services, $32. And number 5 is arts and recreation at $34 an hour. So maybe some tips on pivoting your career if you want to be positioning into those more higher paid industries. Looking at average wealth positions across the country, and I thought this stuff was all pretty interesting, definitely for a money nerd like me, but the median household wealth in Australia is $579,000. The top 10%, so basically if your household wealth is above $2.3 odd million, you're in the top 10% of income earners. Bottom 10% is less than $100,000 in a net wealth position. I'm waiting for, and I'm going to look to dive a bit deeper into this, but how that's actually broken down by age, which I think would be pretty interesting because obviously that does have a big impact. But overall, we're pretty wealthy, as what that says. We've lost our spot as the top country in the world for wealth position, which have been topped out by Luxembourg, which has a net wealth of $941,000 for households. We're coming in at number 3 globally at $528,000, just behind the United States, $684,000, and Luxembourg, as I said, $941K. Our household incomes, though, we're still performing quite strongly on that front, where the 4th highest paid from an income perspective in the world, coming in the United States is topping it out at $51,000 adjustable income. Then Luxembourg, $44,000, New Zealand, $39,000, and Australia coming in at $37,000. So some interesting stats there. And while it doesn't really matter, how you compare, it sort of kind of does as well. So some interesting ones. You can look at that stuff online now if you're keen to dive a little bit deeper as well. The next piece that I saw last week was around the stamp duty being abolished in New South Wales through their, or at least becoming optional through their first home buyer choice scheme. What we saw in the first week of the scheme, that it was getting over 100 applicants per day. That basically this scheme is now in full swing, where for eligible first home buyers, you have the option to opt out of the lump sum stamp duty and instead opt for an annual land tax. Now, over 410 first home buyers in the first 4 days of the scheme opted in. And I can't help but wonder if people really know what they're getting themselves into on this. Now, I was just having a bit of a look around on the calculations, where for $1 million property, the land tax for an owner-occupied property is only $2,000, which compares to about $40,000 in stamp duty. But this tax is every year, and it's increasing with land value. So as your land becomes worth more, then the tax becomes worth, you have to pay more tax on that as well. The other big thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is that when you run a property as an investment, then it also, the tax kicks in at a higher rate. So basically the land tax is structured as $400 for an owner occupied property, $400 flat rate plus 0.3% of the land value. Whereas for an investment property, it's $1,500 flat rate plus 1.1% of the land value. So on $1 million property, if you're running it as an investment, that means it's about $6,000 a year. And a lot of people, when they buy their first home, they get attached to that property. Plus, if you're buying a good property and you don't want to have buy costs and sell costs to sell your property in the future just to avoid paying more land tax and then having to rebuy the property, it means that you're going to pay a much higher ongoing land tax, which I think a lot of people don't realize. So for anyone that's thinking about going down this path, I think that you want to understand the numbers and what it means long term. Now, if this scheme means that you can get into the property market heaps faster, then it might work out in your favor. But if it's just meaning that you're not wanting to pay as much in the first year, you're probably costing yourself a whole bunch more over time. So something to be aware of. Clearly, the scheme is very popular. And yeah, I think it's just about knowing what the numbers are here. My last piece for this week is around food inflation. So we saw some data come out last week talking about the fact that the two major supermarkets, Woolworths and Coles, the food inflation is now coming in at 9.2%, so way above the national rate of inflation, particularly for fresh goods, dairy products and fresh fruit and vegetables, that those categories are running at 9.6%, so almost 10% inflation rate, which is pretty staggering. And given that a lot of these items are pretty much necessary, that you can't do without them, it means that potentially going to kick along for inflation over time. So yeah, it's an interesting one to watch. I know that a lot of the input prices have been going up. That I saw. I put out a bunch of content last week and had a bunch of people, dairy farmers, saying about how much more it's costing them to produce these goods. But I can't help but think that the supermarkets might be taking the piss a little bit with their margins on this stuff, and advantage of the mindset around the fact that we're expecting a little bit more inflation than what we've seen over the last little bit. And I think that when we think about, inflation's currently sitting at a record high, this has the risk of potentially making it run even further. So I think that's something that we want to be keeping a close eye on over the next little bit as the next sets of inflation data is coming in. Guys, that's it for me for this week. I will catch you next time.